So on the path to enlightenment, you'll find that it's entirely about an undoing process. It's dissolving who you think you are. It's unlearning. It's seeing that who you think you are, the separate self, is nothing other than conditions. These conditions are patterns. And enlightenment is this unconditioned self. So on the path, it's like you're undoing yourself. You're seeing, as you become more and more aware, more and more empowered, you're seeing the conditions of the mind, the conditions of the ego. You're seeing the patterns. And you're seeing the patterns as they arise. And you're changing those patterns, or those patterns are being dropped. You're seeing the conditions, and then you're removing the conditions. And there's not so much of a doing. Gotta say that because that's how it kind of feels like it. But really it's a non-doing. It's being aware of it. Because the pattern is the something that's happening. It's the doing. And then by dropping the pattern, you're just not performing that pattern anymore. It's like a seizing of the pattern, a stopping of the pattern. And you'll see these patterns more and more, the more you become more and more aware. You start seeing these patterns, these conditionings. You start seeing the same conditionings of your mind in other people. So you start seeing your mind, and then you start seeing how those people they're operating the same way. It's all going on at my work, in the office, in the sports that I'm playing, in the media, in the culture, in the society, in the world. It starts becoming very obvious. But you have to become aware of it by watching the mind. Otherwise, you don't see the patterns. So when you're caught up in the pattern, you're not able to see the pattern. That's why it's very important to watch the mind. Best way to study the mind is not by analyzing the mind. It's by watching the mind. It's like as if how we study anything. You study space, you watch space. You study a lion, you watch a lion. Right? We're studying by watching, by observing. So if you're not observing your mind, you're not seeing things, right? To see is to observe. You have to, when you observe, you start seeing things. And that's really that developing the witness, staying as awareness, being aware of the mind, not getting caught up into it. And it's so subtle because even when you find that your attention is getting pulled into the mind, see, there's an awareness of that. Otherwise, how would you know that you weren't paying attention, or your attention got pulled in, or that you got lost in your thoughts and started projecting into the future, started dreaming, started imagining, or you got lost in your memory? More, it's about lost in imagination. You're getting lost in the future. The future is imagination. Or you're getting stuck in your memory, stuck in the past. Memories, past. Future, imagination. Both not real. What's real is the present moment. So it's to have that awareness to see where we're getting lost or we're getting stuck or we're not present. And just seeing that, it then makes you present. Because there's a gentle seeing and then feeling like a returning to that awareness. It always feels like there's this, I was thinking about myself for quite a while now. Me. I was caught up in this talking to myself. A lot of people, they pride themselves on like how much they talk to themselves. Like it's a good thing. Who are you having the conversation with? Myself. Okay. But when you're talking to yourself and you're caught up in your own story, you're creating a story just to be entertained by your own story. And when you're creating your own story and you're entertaining yourself, well, you're missing out on life. It's like going to the movies and you're saying, let me watch the new movie. But you know what? Well, the new movie's up there on the screen. I'm gonna create my own story. Yeah. I'm just gonna start talking to myself in my head while that movie's going on. And then you and your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your buddy kind of come out of the movie theater, kind of talking, and your buddy, your friend is saying, did you like that part? Did you see that part? And you're, oh no, I didn't, I think I missed it. I didn't see that part. I didn't really get that. That wasn't my experience. Why? Because you're experiencing your own story. You're not experiencing life. You're experiencing the story in your mind. You're creating that story. You're being entertained by the story. It's a story for you, about you. Classic ego, creating a story about itself. And then it misses out on what's real. The present moment. Right? That's why you're getting lost in the dream. You're just dreaming. It's like you're daydreaming. So it's becoming aware of when we're daydreaming. And then you bring yourself back to the present moment. You find when you're present, you're not caught up in the thought. You'll start to notice that when you are really present, who you think you are, that identity, the mind-made sense of self, is not even there. This is when you're very present. And you start having these long stretches, maybe not long stretches, but they'll start off as just these kind of like feeling like periods of time where you kind of go, it's like I disappeared. Like, where did time go? Where did I go? Like, did I just, you don't black out, but there seems to be like almost like some unaccounted time where you could be running and you're like, whoa, that was an hour run? It felt like 10 minutes. Or you're tubing or boating or wakeboarding or something, some sort of water activity, let's say in this example. And then you're, oh my goodness, the sun's setting already. It felt like we just got out on the water. We're having so much fun because you're so present. And what you notice is that when you're so present, you're not daydreaming. You're not thinking. There's just the experience of what is. And usually, it feels really good. It feels really good. A lot of us, we have these activities that we participate in. Could be like yoga, stretching, right? hatha yoga or water activities or rock climbing or running or knitting or cutting the grass, whatever it is. And we kind of feel like it's that activity that we really like. You know, wow, I really enjoy running. But really, is yes, we do enjoy running, but what's more important is what we really enjoy is being present. Because when you're very present, that joy is actually generated from yourself. By being very present, it's like you're bathing in your own joy. That joy is not coming from the activity. It appears like it is, but it's not. It's actually coming from the true self. That's why if you become aware of this, you'll find that it's kind of like who you think you are when you're there. When who you think you are is there, there's no happiness. And when who you think you are disappears, there's happiness. But there's never who you think you are and happiness. There's never the my self-image, my image of myself being happy. It always pops up after. There's just, here you are, I'm thinking about myself. Yeah, I'm such a good runner. Oh, I'm such a good knitter. Oh, I'm doing so good wakeboarding. I can't wait to show everybody. Right? There's that. Then there's just being very present. As you be very present, this just seems to dissolve in the present moment. And now there's just what is the present moment. There's the enjoyment. There's just the activities happening. There's not a you wakeboarding. There's just wakeboarding. There's not a you knitting. There's just knitting. There's not a you running. There's just running. That limited sense of self has dissolved in the present moment. It's dissolved. Where then that's that presence, the true self, that awareness of what is, that is now, it seemed to have come from the background to permeate everything. And what you're experiencing, that contentment, that fulfillment, that joy, that peace, that love, that freedom, that is not actually coming from the activity. It's actually what you are. It's actually what you are. And then what happens is you start to not be present for some time. Sometimes the thought or something kind of pulls you out of the present moment. Your phone rings or someone calls, whatever happens, right? And then there's the limited sense of self kind of pops up. Oh, yeah, got to make plans. Oh, something happened. Oh, got it. Right? It starts, oh, there's then the narration, the story comes back online. We got to do this. It starts talking like there's two of you. We got to do this later on tonight. Yeah, we should. Who's the we? Who's the we? Right? That's, oh, wow. Wakeboarding. I was having so much fun. It wants the ego. It wants to claim ownership. Right? It's kind of like that aroma of that happiness, that love, that freedom, that peace is still kind of like in the air. Right? When it wasn't there, right? It was there, then it disappeared. And it disappeared, and now there's just that enjoyment, that fulfillment, that happiness, that peace, that love, that freedom, that's there. And there's just the awareness. And then it's like, it kind of like, right? You get pulled out of the present moment, and then it's kind of like it sneaks up, right? It sneaks up, I'm back, and it smells like happiness. Oh, yeah, I was so happy there, right? And it's like, get out of here. No, you weren't. You weren't even there. But it claims ownership once it gets that aroma of the happiness that seems to kind of linger after being fully present. It's like, I was so happy. You know what? Let me take a selfie and post that just to let other people know that I had a happy moment. I'm happy, right? It wants to capture it. It wants to freeze time. It wants to preserve. It wants to create a memory. Right? And then it wants to reproduce that in the future at some point. Let's do this tomorrow. Let's do this again. Right? Whereas what is that actually? That's the activity, right? That's the activity of the past and the activity of the future, both being thought activity, both being just an activity. Let's preserve this memory. Let's try and create this again. You're imagining, how can it be a little bit better? How can we do this longer? How can we do this again? I want to just replicate the same experience. What experience? Every experience is brand new. You can't recreate the same experience. Every experience is unique. It's always new. The present moment is always fresh. That's why whenever the separate self is there, it's not present. It's like, hey, let's that's happiness. Let's reproduce that happiness again, shall we? Right? Pay attention. You'll see. Be aware of it. You'll see. You'll see that, when you're in the zone, experiencing the flow state, you're not there. There's no you in the flow state. When there's a you, there's resistance of flow. The you is actually more like a beaver dam. When you're not there, there's no beaver dam, and therefore there's flow. The who you think you are is the beaver dam. It's the resistance. Once you find that when you're not resisting, I'm just knitting. I'm crocheting. I'm just running. I'm just wakeboarding. I'm just fishing. Right? Then there's no I. There's just fishing. The I starts off in the activity and then it drops. There's just fishing. There's just wakeboarding. That sense of who you think you are, that identity just drops. And that identity is really, it is the resistance. Just like I said, it's like that beaver dam it disappears. When the sense of self disappears, the resistance disappears. The two are the same. And when there's no resistance, there's just allowance of the present moment, which is always flowing. The river of life. It's always flowing. Whatever's coming down the river, it's always new. You've never seen it before. You've never experienced it before. And you can't re-experience it. It's like, there it's coming. It's coming. That water, you can't experience it. Once it's gone, it's gone. You can't re-experience it. But while you're trying to preserve it, while you're trying to remember it, you're missing out on the new water that's coming down to be experienced. So that's something to just pay more and more attention to, because as you become more and more aware, you'll start seeing you'll start being aware of these kind of gaps where you're kind of like, whoa, I was usually like caught up in my head thinking and narrating and creating a story. You're like, went like an hour without doing that. Or I was cutting the grass for 20 minutes and wow, I was like zenned out. Right? You have to, like, when you talk about it, when you kind of think about it after, of course, like to make this video, I have to say I. But in the actual moment, there's no, I feel so happy cutting the grass. There's none of that. There's just cutting the grass, and there's just the enjoyment of it. But like I said, that's the enjoyment when the sense of I, the sense of self, the mind-made sense of self just drops. It drops. So that's something to be aware of. And then you can see what were we talking about at the start is these patterns, is starting to see that these patterns, all these patterns really like make up that sense of self. So like I'm kind of showing you is when it dissolves, there's just happiness. So then it's these conditionings that make up that sense of self, the conditioning of being right or wrong. When you remove the being right, when you just don't care about being right, you start seeing like, well, it's way more peaceful. I'm enjoying, like there's more enjoyment to life, right? I'd rather be happy than be right. People who insist on being right, they're never happy. They're making everyone out to be wrong and they're the only one being right. Classic ego, right? It's that resistance to what is, that rejection, right? So there's so many patterns to name. I can't name them all in one video, but it's seeing that's a pattern, that being right, that being better than someone is a pattern, right? It's a pattern. It's like we've been conditioned in school. You got to be the top of the class. You got to be like, you've got a family of 3. You got to be the best daughter, the best son. You got to be better than your neighbor. You got to have a better business. This being better than someone, a condition. So you see that all these conditions, they're all these positionalities and opinions and beliefs, feelings that altogether it's like this bundle that really make up that separate self, the who you think you are. So once you start undoing it, yeah, you know what? I notice that when I'm not trying to be right, I'm more peaceful. You want to be right? Go ahead. You just let other people. Because your peace is valued more than being right. To be right, well, they want to be right too. So it's 2 people trying to battle to be right, arguing about something that's nothing. Just creating conflict for the sake of conflict, because they're essentially, it's like they're both just trying to preserve their sense of self. This exists when it's right. The ego is strong when it's always about being right. It wants to be right. It wants to defend itself. So it's going to be in conflict with another ego. And it wants to be right. Once you start seeing that as a condition, you see that as a pattern, and you start becoming aware that when you're always arguing about being right, well, you're missing out. You're missing out on the peace that's always here. It's taking you away from the peace. It's taking you away from the peace that you are. This conditioning, this pattern. So then it's like, you become less interested in being right. Which then you're less involved in arguments. You become more disciplined to just simply have humility. Yeah, you want to be right? Sure, no problem. Walk away. Right? You just walk away. You stay silent. Sure. Yeah, you know what? You're right. Then the funny thing is, the video's trying to turn it out longer, but whatever. If you're into it, you're into it. You're going to be sticking around. The funny thing is when you start doing that with people in your life, you'll see that they don't even want, like, they want the fight. They want the ego wants the juice. It wants the juice. It wants the negative energy out of an argument between 2. Because as you dissolve your ego, as the ego's starting to dissolve, because you're removing these conditioned patterns, such as being right, you're kind of like, all right, I don't want an argument. You know what? Here, I'm waving the white flag. You win. I surrender. Here's the white flag. I surrender. You're surrendering, you're letting go of these conditionings. Because enlightenment is actually, it's an unconditional surrender. It's an unconditional surrender. You surrender. It's the ultimate surrender. You surrender yourself as everything that you think you are. You surrender your life. So all this is undoing. But what you'll notice is that it's very liberating. Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm free. What are you free from? You're free from conflict. Being free from conflict is peace. But as long as you value being right, you're also valuing conflict, which means that you're not valuing peace. Right? You're valuing being limited instead of valuing being limitless. You're valuing an illusion instead of valuing the truth. But back to it is, you'll find if you practice this, you'll see it very quickly. The people that you love always getting arguments and getting that juice, love arguing with this person. We argue about the way that so-and-so puts away the dishes. We argue about the toilet seat being up or down. We argue about crumbs on the floor. We argue about the way the bed needs to be tucked in. Whatever it is, these silly things. You'll notice that there's way more silliness when you're living with someone. Is that when you give up, when you surrender, they've got this energy that just, it's like, no, don't surrender. Like, you just, all right, you're right. They're like, they can't just, it's like they don't win when you give it to them. All right, you want the win? Sure, you're right. Here you go. Take the W. I'm going on the couch and relaxing. They're like, they want the juice. They want the argument because it's what preserves the ego. It's one of the things that preserves the ego, that sense of separation, that sense of self, where they're like, no, like they'll just want to argue, right? And you're like, chill out. Like, you're right. You won. You're right. I give up. I surrender. They're not okay with the surrendering. Because it's, again, when you see it, it's this energy. It wants the argument. It wants the back and forth. And you basically put down your paddle. You know, I'm not here, just you win. And they go, but I want to play. It's like a game. It's like, I want to play. I need someone to play with. They need someone. That's what an argument is. Right? Unless you're arguing with yourself. There are people that argue with themselves. But usually it takes two to argue. So when you just basically surrender, then they basically, well, I want to play. Because the ego, it's a very immature state of consciousness. You see it, once you start seeing this, you start seeing it with kids. As they're developing their ego. You start seeing it. But you'll start noticing that when you just let go and you surrender, that don't get sucked into it, because they're going to come even harder, kind of feel like whoa, and you're kind of, you might think, thought might pop in, chill, like I just let you win. I just surrendered. What it does, it needs that humility, which really humility is, it's surrendering pride. It's letting go of pride. It's like when you let go of pride, there's the humility that was always there. Right? Pride is something that you have to build up. Once you start letting go of the pride, I'm usually prideful by proving my point, by arguing with other people so that I can feel better than they are. You start removing that pride. You start undoing that pride. And now there's just the humility. Right? Where you're there and they're kind of wondering, like, you're not going to argue with me? Nope. Like, but we used to. This is the old conditioning that then starts making it really hard, because you're seeing the pattern in yourself, but then you're also going to start seeing that outward pattern where it's projected, where in your relationships, you'll start seeing like they just, it's more like just like how your mind seduces you and really lures you in. You're going to see the same thing projected outwardly. Like you're going to walk away. Oh yeah. Oh, you want to get in an argument? And you're just basically, nope, not today. Not today. You're right. Yeah, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Right? Usually a lot of people don't want to say sorry, which then keeps the argument heightened. Right? Usually there's a sorry maybe if you're lucky. There's a sorry maybe after a 20-minute argument, sometimes a day, 2 days, and then there's finally the sorry. Right? Try it. Try saying sorry soon. Very fast. Letting go of the pride. You're right. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Can you forgive me? Right? You'll find that they don't want to forgive you. They want to stir up that argument. Wait, no. Because that argument, it's like a fire. You just extinguish the fire. Because you extinguish the fire when you remove the fuel source. And you start having the awareness to realize that you were fueling the fire. By you contributing to it, you're putting gasoline on the fire. But when you remove yourself, when you remove the pride, when you just simply remove the being better, the righteousness, being right, when you remove that pattern, then there's no fuel source. And the other, the ego of the other is kind of like, where am I going to get my fix from? Who can I argue with now? I can't argue with myself. Wait, maybe I can argue with myself. Yeah, right. Now they're looking for someone to argue with. So you'll start noticing just like how the mind seduces and really, really starts putting on all the tricks. You'll see that partner of yours or the other person, they'll come over to you now. They'll get in your face. And you're kind of like, just what? I surrendered. You're right. That happened in the kitchen. Now I'm in the living room now. You're coming over here, picking a fight with the same thing. Just drop it. They can't let go of it. They can't let go of the situation. They're stuck in that past, trying to preserve, trying to dig into the past. You'll start seeing that if you surrender that argument, they'll just pick something new to argue about. Oh yeah, the dishes. Oh yeah, but these crumbs on the floor. Oh yeah, but what about yesterday? They'll start bringing up stuff exactly like the mind. When you start observing your mind, it starts just, everything just starts coming up to the surface just to distract you. Right? But it's seeing these patterns of the mind, and then you'll start seeing the patterns outwardly in your life, that then it's an undoing. It's an undoing on the path to enlightenment. It's an undoing. It's seeing the process of, yes, when I'm trying to hold the position of being right, then I need to also say that I'm better than someone, and I'm holding this positionality of this separateness. And I'm holding this positionality of being better than someone, that I got to prove that I'm better. I got to prove that I'm right, that there's a conflict. When there's a conflict, I got to win. I got to come up victorious. I'm not surrendering. I'm not, no way. I don't want to be a loser. Where everything is counterintuitive. It's like losing is winning. Surrendering is winning. What are you winning? You're winning your peace. Right? You're giving up control. There. You want control? Take control. Go. Argue with yourself. You're in control. Go on. I give it. Giving up control is power. Right? It's power. But when we're practicing this, that's where I said it's like a game. It's like a game. It's you're mastering yourself. The more aware, treat it as it's being more fun. Don't be so serious about it, because even seriousness, that's a condition. That's a condition, because the seriousness creates the heaviness. And what's enlightenment? Lightness, right? Lightness. You feel light. So when you're feeling heavy, it shows you something's off. When you're feeling heavy, you're holding on to something. So you start, now, what am I holding on to? I'm feeling pretty heavy. What am I holding on to? Many things. Identities, expectations, beliefs, desires, all these different things. But as you become more and more aware, you start seeing them. And it becomes a game of undoing your own mind, undoing your own conditioning, undoing those patterns, internally as well as externally. But you start seeing it. And it's almost like things are being kind of in your life start arising just to test you. Like you said, if you see it like a game, that you're mastering life, that you're being the master, and you start seeing like everything is now testing you. What can you learn? How do you usually react? How are you changing? How is this changing your mood? How is this changing how you're feeling and interacting with other people? All this type of stuff, you're always learning from the present moment. The present moment becomes your teacher. You're getting instant feedback 24/7. And that's like for most people, it's a new attitude or mindset. Who's your teacher? Life. What? Most people, what? That doesn't mean, what are you talking about? Yeah. See, I'm learning all the time. I'm applying all the time. I'm getting feedback all the time. Right? If you kind of had this attitude, then it's more of it's the right attitude. It's the right attitude that allows more progress on the path. And you're going to find that you start really undoing yourself. And the more you undo yourself, the more you let go, the more you grow. The more you undo yourself, then you're going to feel a lot lighter. You start tapping into more of that natural state. You're going to start feeling more natural. Because until there's that awareness, then you don't realize how unnatural things feel. And when you start feeling that unnaturalness, you start seeing it outward. That's not natural. What is everyone? This is not right. This is not, I shouldn't say the word right. This is not natural. Something feels off. And you'll start feeling that. And that's, again, it's like that emotional guidance system that allows you to then, awareness, something feels off. Awareness, something feels not natural. And you start looking at it. Yeah, what is that? What is that? You start undoing beliefs. You start undoing projections and desires and a bunch of different things that you just start undoing. Because they're all there kind of at the core. Superficially, you start seeing, I'm frustrated. But you're not seeing deeper. Once you start seeing deeper, why am I frustrated? It's with the introspection, right? You're seeing into yourself. The insight that you're looking in, I'm feeling frustrated because I have an expectation that things need to go my way. And things aren't going my way. So now, when things aren't going my way, I'm now frustrated. I'm feeling powerless in this situation. Why am I feeling powerless? Well, because I'm blaming the other. I'm blaming the external circumstance. As long as I'm blaming someone else or something outside of myself, I don't have the responsibility. When I don't have the responsibility, I'm not able to respond. Responsibility, the ability to respond. So if I'm not able to respond, yeah, I feel powerless. So you start looking at these things and start seeing how the mechanism is. You start seeing how things are really wired. You start seeing how you're wired, how the mind is wired, I should say. You start seeing how the mind is wired, and you start seeing that, yeah, like a lot of these things like anger and being a victim, that's only possible when through blame. Get rid of blame, it's hard to be angry. Get rid of blame, it's hard to be a victim. I would say impossible. So you start to see what's that thing, that source that's creating it's like the domino effect. Because a lot of people are only seeing the last domino, this falls, but they're not seeing what sets it in motion. So when you go to the core and you start seeing this and you pull that, you undo that, well, then you're undoing a bunch of different mechanisms. Right? And that's what takes practice. That's what takes practice. That's what takes raising the awareness to be able to see, to increase your insight so that you can see into things. You can penetrate things deeper with your insight and see at the core level of what's going on. So let's keep this video at that. And those are just some of those things there of just undoing, dissolving, letting go. That's really the path to enlightenment.